Welcome, everybody. Today we're talking about anti-racism versus diversity because I have heard many people ask if racism is a specific thing they should be focusing on, or if it would be better to focus first on diversity or inclusion in some other way. And we're specifically going to look at anti-racism and diversity because we can only do so much in 15 minutes and it's already a big topic for a micro training. But we're going to do something to give you a few ideas to start off with. And as usual, I have, or as often is the case, I do have an opinion for you about a best way to approach it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Olivieri. I'm a #1 international best-selling author, former executive director, creator of the Impact Method, and my master's degree is also in humanistic multicultural education. I've been relying on some of those earlier experiences when I got my master's to help inform some of these racism-specific trainings, in addition to my own experiences as a professional. So let's dive into this topic. I know some people feel really uncomfortable talking about racism, so I just want to applaud everybody who has showed up today, everybody who is watching this in the replay. This doesn't need to be a scary topic, even though it does often end up being outside of many people's comfort zones. But that's okay. So let's take a look at racism. I want to just put it in kind of a view for you, right? Anti-racism at your nonprofit. Anti-racism is a term that's becoming very popular. I love it because it really is about your choice in how you choose to approach the world. And there's kind of a couple things that anti-racism is assuming that I completely believe are true. One is that for the most part, racism is our status quo. So if we're not working against racism specifically, then we are likely perpetuating racism in many ways. And racism shows up in many, many forms, way more than we could begin to go into today. But it can be, in systemic racism, which could include the traditions of how you do things, as well as it could be embedded in your policies. You could just be perpetuating it by a result of you living in an area that has very little diversity. That might have been a result of racism, whether you're all white or all black or another race. So there's lots of areas where racism can form. But some basic steps to being anti-racist are learn about racism. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are or the makeup of your nonprofit or your community, you can learn about racism. You can read a book, you can talk to people, you can read the news. There are many, many resources for learning about racism. And I think that that is a great place to start. If you're really at step one, start a book club at your nonprofit, or agree that you're all going to read some articles and set aside some time to talk about racism. And here I've used the word practice. Practice talking about racism. Yes, actually talk about racism, but just like meditation is a practice. You're not just going to swoosh and wipe out racism, and you're not going to suddenly be able to talk about it easily. It's something you have to get used to. So develop a practice of regularly talking about racism. Learn to see it, right? For most Black people in America, seeing racism is relatively easy on quite a number of levels, although in other levels, it can be very hard to tell whether or not in a particular experience is the result of racism or not. And for many white people, especially if you're in a very white area, or anybody else of any color or style, racism can be seen or not seen at varying degrees. It is possible to be a white person in this country and really have trouble seeing it at first. But as you learn about it, you should learn to practice seeing it. And if you're looking around and say, we can't see it because we're all white, you're looking at racism right there. It is a product of racism, most likely, that you are an all-white community. So learning to see it, learning to name it is a really important part of this process of anti-racism. And finally, and this is where you need to get specific to what you're capable of, ready to do at your organization. And I'd be happy to hop on a call with anybody or answer questions at the end one-on-one about what you might do in your organization. But develop strategies to eliminate and reduce racism. So once you know it's there and you know kind of what it looks like, a strategy, right, at its very simplest is a goal and a set of steps you're going to take to achieve that goal. So set yourself a goal around something that's related to racism and then plan a number of steps that are hopefully going to achieve that goal. That's anti-racism in a nutshell. And I want to just put anti-racism, we're not really going to talk about discrimination in depth today, but the anti-racism is part of this bigger bubble of being anti-discrimination or anti-discriminatory. And one thing that's special about discrimination is it seems that we do this as human beings again and again and again. History is ripe with us forming all sorts of ways of discriminating. And my personal guess is that it has something to do with our desire to self-actualize and differentiate ourselves as individuals, which is a really good thing. But often I think we end up in all sorts of power struggles. So same as anti-racism, all the same steps are going to apply. But with an addition, when you're thinking about anti-racism as a whole, anti-discrimination, sorry, as a whole, you want to recognize that pretty much whenever you are going to change or something new is happening, whether or not you planned it, there's often an opportunity for new discrimination to emerge or for you to discover that you have discrimination that you didn't even know was there. So really to think about change, whenever you're thinking about bringing something new in or thinking about change, to address discrimination or be anti-discriminatory proactively as part of that change process. So that includes talking about what people might be uncomfortable with, maybe talking about other people who have gone through a similar change before, knowing what might be the trip up points as you go into it. But the reason why I'm sharing this bubble like this is because I want you to realize, if you've worked with me at all, I'm a big big fan of not overloading your plate. So it is okay to say right now we're going to work on anti-racism, knowing that in part it is helping us with the bigger picture of anti-discrimination, but taking on the whole big picture of anti-discrimination in one fell swoop is probably more than you can do at once, especially if you have other things going on, and I'm guessing that you do. So being specific makes it more meaningful and still sends you in a direction. And right now is a great time to be focusing specifically on racism. One, because it is so prevalent in our system, and two, because it's on many people's minds. A change moment, for better or worse, why it got here, is upon us, and you can take advantage of that to make leaps and bounds forward in progress, because people are already thinking about it and people are already learning about it. So you are definitely making a dent in this bigger picture of discrimination, which is a good thing, but I encourage you to be specific. So let's talk about diversity in your nonprofit. Diversity is really the presence of difference. And typically when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about it as a good thing, right? The differences are important and they actually add value to our communities. They add value to our organizations. And I would love to do a whole training on why diversity adds value. But here are some quick action steps around promoting diversity. Recognize how you are not diverse. Again, right? Seeing it is like step one. You can't deal with your problem until you know you have a problem. So recognize the way you're not diverse. And diversity in its own doesn't necessarily mean racial diversity. It could be age diversity, diversity of ideas, opinions, cultures, styles. There are many, unlimited number pretty much of differences to potentially embrace. And a next step after recognizing how you might not be diverse would be to value diversity of ideas. Even before you try to add people, new people into the fold, try to get your existing people to be willing and feel safe to share their ideas. One way is to, give awards or compensation or recognition to out-of-the-box ideas. It doesn't matter if they're good. It doesn't matter if they're going to work. Just the fact that people are presenting them to the group is really, really important. And having a culture of respecting and valuing different ideas will set you up for bringing more diverse, different people in. People themselves are not diverse within themselves. You get diversity within a group. It will set you up for success in bringing new people in. And practice experiencing new things, especially if you've struggled with becoming more diverse. Try just different things. Flex that muscle of getting used to change and new things without letting the, oh, we don't like change or it's different, it makes us feel uncomfortable. The more you do it, the better you will be at diversity. So inclusion, right? We hear inclusion a lot. I'm not really going to go deep on it, but in case you were wondering, inclusion lives at the intersection of anti-discrimination and diversity, and certainly anti-racism and diversity. So really good things happening with inclusion, but it's pretty hard just to say we're going to tackle being inclusive without really being aware of how to tackle diversity and how to tackle anti-racism and discrimination. So where do you start? And the reality is you could start anywhere, because this is like the process of peeling an onion, right? You're gonna be anti-racist, you're gonna be more diverse. As you have a more diverse community, you're going to uncover more racism, more prejudices. You're going to be able to see yourself better. The more you have diverse ideas and viewpoints in your organization, the more you can see what your issues are, which is great for working towards eliminating racism, eliminating discrimination, and it's also really, really, really good for your nonprofit to be better at everything else that it does. So these are all good things. But as you know, I'm a strong believer in having a really good next step. So if you're debating where do we start, which is the best place, I'm going to propose that you start with anti-racism. And here's why. I have a few points for you. Why to start with anti-racism? One, if you start with diversity, which often happens, we think, oh, our board isn't diverse, right? Let's add some new people. Well, if you start with diversity on your board instead of anti-racism, you might be putting the burden of being anti-racist on the newcomer who's already unduly burdened by racism in the first place, and then doubly disadvantaged because they're the new person, and the new person rarely wants to be the change maker, although occasionally they do. But for the most part, we don't want to do that. That's how we end up with the token Black person on the board, or the chosen person of color, or wherever direction we're trying to be diverse. So if you focus on anti-racism as the first layer of the onion, and then go for diversity as the next layer, and then you can come back and forth, or start doing them at the same time. Another reason why I suggest you start with anti-racism is that if you do so, you'll be proactively drawn to diversity. If you start rooting out the racism within your organization, within your policies, practices, habits, you will inevitably come to a point at which you realize that your lack of diversity, if you have it, is the result of racism, and that it will move you to taking very proactive steps to being diverse. And when that happens, one, being proactive is always better than being reactive. And two, it will set up the new folks who are joining you to diversify your community to have that inclusive experience. You'll really nicely fall in that middle section where we have genuine positive inclusion. On the other side of the coin, if we start with diversity, you're at risk for having a diverse group who pushes you to being anti-racist because they don't like their experience that they're having, and you may end up there, but it might be in a reactive mode. And a reactive mode is almost never as quality an adaptation to a new situation than a proactive mode. And finally, if you start with anti-racism, you're starting from a point of accountability, right? The change starts with you. And you can't necessarily snap your fingers and be diverse today and get started, but you can start making anti-racist choices today. Every single one of you on this call, every single person watching this video in the replay has everything they need to start on an anti-racist decision-making journey today, right now. Maybe the first step is educating yourself, but that goes a very, very long way. So that is a last reason. I probably could come up with many more with a little more time, but I think those are really great reasons to start with anti-racism and let it lead you to diversity. As always, if you'd like to have a personal one-on-one conversation about this or any other topic about your nonprofit, you're welcome to apply for a call.